Hi and welcome to this latest 10x leadership video. This week we're going to talk about the absolute best leadership style. So something that should be really helpful and practical. But before we do, I just want you to stop, just have a think. What is your leadership style? Lots of people haven't got a clue what the leadership style is, or they're very, very specific. So have a think and we'll go through and I'll tell you what the absolute best leadership style is. Okay, so you've had a think, you've worked out what your leadership style is. Let's have a look at a number of leadership styles, and then I'm going to tell you which of those is the absolute best leadership style. Okay, so I'm going to disappear off into the corner. Title suggests there is an absolute best leadership style. Don't believe people who tell you there isn't, and I'm going to tell you what it is. So let's have a look at some leadership styles. So the very first one is autocratic leadership. So as you can see there, in this style, the leader holds all the power and makes decisions without consulting others. And for each of these, I've done some pros and some cons just to help us work out which of these is the absolute best. So pros, it's great for decision making and quick decision making. There's clear direction and structure because, of course, the autocratic leader is in charge. They're just making the decisions. They don't have to consult with people. They just get on with it. Of course, the cons of that are that can lead to resentment and lack of motivation amongst team members. So imagine being in a team where somebody constantly is deciding how to do things without consulting you, especially if you're paid to be an expert. How does that make you feel? It also limits creativity and innovation because you're only going to get the ideas from the person making the decisions. And again, is that the right way of doing things? The second one is the opposite of that, which is democratic leadership. And this style involves leaders including team members in the decision-making process. And I think the important thing just to point out here, it's not about everyone having a say and everyone deciding and it being a democratic vote about what's the right answer. It's about including everyone in the decision-making process. So you can see there the pros. It fosters a sense of ownership and commitment amongst team members. Well, you can imagine it would, wouldn't you, if you're in a team where you're consulted, your leader is interested in hearing what you've got to say. You get to share the best ideas, so it encourages creativity and innovation. Excuse me, and it would make you feel good, wouldn't it? But there are some downsides, and the downsides are decision making, and the decision making process can be much slower. So again, imagine if you had to have a conversation and get consensus before you moved ahead with anything. That could take a very long time. And what happens when you've got people who don't agree and aren't going to change their mind? It can also lead to indecisiveness. If consensus can't be reached. So, what do you do, and what does the leader do if your team can't help you decide the right answer? It's great if it's all everyone's got the same opinion. I say that, but again, that's not really diversity of thought, is it? If everyone's got exactly the same idea, it feels a bit like groupthink to me. So, is that the right thing? So is democratic leadership the absolute best leadership style? The next one is transformational leadership. So in this one, transformational leaders influence their followers and inspire them to perform beyond their perceived capabilities. So you heard me talking in one of my previous videos about really good leaders will help people get more out of themselves than they believed existed in the first place. So perhaps this is the absolute best. It certainly inspires loyalty and commitments among team members, because people like to feel they're growing and developing and moving forwards. and it certainly encourages personal growth and development. So, some really strong pros with this transformational leadership, but again, some cons. So the thing with this is it relies heavily on the leader's charisma, and that may not be sustainable. And what happens when that person moves on? There's a similar leadership style we're going to cover on one of the other slides as well, that is it's subtly different, but actually it also relies on charisma, and it can be challenging to implement in all situations. So it's great when we're trying to get the best out of people, but not every situation needs that approach. So again, is transformational leadership the absolute best leadership style? Again, we'll see in a minute. So moving on to transactional leadership. So in this one, transactional leaders focus on rewarding positive behaviours and punishing negative ones. So the good thing about that is it definitely gives people who work for a transactional leader an understanding of where the boundaries are and what's going to be rewarded, what's positive and what isn't. And it can also be effective in maintaining order and discipline. So, if you're in a team that requires that, that's not a bad, it's not a bad approach. But again, because it's, there's quite a lot of, I suppose, negativity with this, or at least perceived negativity. If people aren't getting it right, they don't understand the rules, it can feel like people are being punished and told off and criticised a lot. So it may not foster creativity and innovation again, because people are thinking, well, I don't want to put that idea forward because if it's not in the rules, I'm going to get told off for that. So, one of the best ways of stifling creativity and innovation is to basically tell people they're wrong. So again, there's a real downside to that. And it also relies on extrinsic, easy for me to say, motivation, which again may not be sustainable in the long term. So sort of external validation, if you will, that again, you can't necessarily keep doing that forever. So again, is transactional leadership the right answer? Is that the absolute best leadership style? Well, delegative leadership, might say, well, this is the best way of leading. So this is also called laissez-faire leadership. So if you take this too far, it can just feel like there is no leadership at all. In one of the later videos we'll talk about delegation, and if you take it too far, it's not delegation at all, it's abdication. So the leader doesn't take responsibility. They just push all of that responsibility onto their team, and if it goes wrong, that's somebody else's problem. That's, my book, that's not leadership. There are some pros with this, of course. It does foster independence and autonomy. And again, in one of the later videos, we'll talk about digital leadership. And not necessarily autonomy, but independence is a really good thing. But we'll cover that in another video. This also can lead to creative problem solving, because this is about asking the team, how would they fix this problem? How would they go about solving it? And, instead of one person's ideas, then you've got many, many people's ideas. All of the team members can contribute to this, because they can decide what's important and they can decide how to take it forward. So I say, in terms of the cons, there could be a lack of direction and guidance. That could lead to inefficiency and confusion. And I have seen where people have been doing this sort of delegative leadership, for people who are in the right space and are appropriately competent, it might be a good thing. For some people though, imagine going into a new job where you don't really know what you're doing and your boss is just delegating everything to you. Again, how are you going to feel? How are you going to operate? Do you know how to do these things? Who are you going to go to try and get support and find the answers to the questions that you don't know? If everything's been delegated, especially if it's more down the abdication end of the scale, there's not going to be anyone there to talk to. So it could feel very isolating. The other thing is, in order to have delegative leadership, you really need highly skilled and self-motivated team members. So again, it will only work in certain circumstances and with the right people. So, what are you thinking? Are you thinking this is the absolute best leadership style? Hopefully, as we go through this, you're thinking about people as well that you've seen. You're also assessing your own leadership style and thinking about the leadership style that you said that you adopt earlier, and thinking, do these things apply to me? Do I do these things or not? One of the others is servant leadership. So in this, the leaders prioritise the needs of the team members and focus on serving them rather than being served. So, for me, the one of the old-fashioned ways of working is the opposite to this, and I think we're going to come on to that on the next slide. But this is about, it's almost inverting the leadership model and having the leaders clear the way, clear the path, make it easy for their teams to deliver. And depending on the operating model of your organisation, that might work. That might be exactly the right answer, especially if you've got a lot of experts and you're not an expert, you're not a technical expert, but you're very good at leadership. Then servant leadership might be exactly the right thing to do. The pros of this: it builds trust and loyalty amongst team members. Well, I suppose it would, wouldn't it? Because again, they feel supported because the leader is there making sure that they've got what they need. And it also promotes a positive work culture and teamwork. The cons: it may be perceived as weak or ineffective in hierarchical environments. So if you're in an organisation that is particularly grade conscious or level, the levels of your organisation, the bosses like to be the bosses, this may not go down well. And it can also be challenging to balance the serving of others with achieving organisational goals, especially if the leader has been given the task of achieving those organisational goals. So, just imagine for a moment you've got a series of targets and basically your team are going to deliver those targets and you need to support them in doing that. And they will tell you what they want in order for you to help them. Again, that can absolutely work. It depends on the individuals as well and the way you go about that. And if the individuals don't know what they want, again, you might come a cropper. This is the last slide, so 3 more leadership styles just to have a look at. So the next one is the one that I mentioned before, so the charismatic leader. So in this style, charismatic leaders inspire and influence through their personal charm and charisma. And you can probably think of some leaders through history who have operated like that. Some might say that this is almost sort of touching on a cult-like status where people don't necessarily listen to what the person's saying. It's how they're saying it, and it's their charisma and personality that's carrying the message, and encouraging people to follow them. So the pros with this one: it inspires enthusiasm and passion amongst team members. And for me, that's probably the phrase that really sticks in my mind. It's the passion. And often these are really, really passionate. I suppose they're almost believers in what the charismatic leader is saying. And as a result of that, as it says there in the slide, it can be effective in rallying people around a shared vision. The cons, though, it relies heavily on the leader's personality, and you may not be able to replicate that when that person goes. So you might think of teams or political parties or ideologies that have existed that have been centered on an individual. That's what this charismatic leadership style is. And as it says there, in terms of the cons, may overlook the importance of practical skills and competencies. So as I was saying earlier, this one is more about believing in what the individual says rather than checking and testing and making sure that the person really knows what they're talking about. It is more about belief than anything else, I think. So again, is that your leadership style? Is that the absolute best leadership style? As you can see, all of these have got pros and cons. So, which of these is the most important? The next one is the coaching leadership style. And, if I'm honest, this is the one that I sort of lean more heavily towards. It's about focusing on developing the skills and abilities of the team through mentorship and guidance. And the pros there are it does support continuous learning and development for individuals, and it also builds a pipeline of talent within the organisation. So instead of the leader having all the knowledge and all the expertise and knowing how to do everything, that all of that is shared with team members, because that helps the whole organisation operate more effectively. And then when that person's gone, individuals who follow on know how to do the same sort of thing. They've understood the mechanics of how to do things and the rationale and the why things were done, rather than just go off and do this thing. The cons of that is it takes a significant amount of time and investment in individual coaching. So, if you're time strapped, then coaching leadership style, may or may not be the right answer. And also it can be less effective in high pressure or time sensitive situations. So, I suppose I was just trying to think of an example there. It's not a work related example, but, if somebody was standing on a train track and a train was coming, you wouldn't coach them to make the right decision about stepping off. You'd probably have to, because it's a time-sensitive situation, you probably have to go for a different style. So again, is coaching leadership the absolute best leadership style? And the last one here is about command and control leaders. So leaders who follow this style follow strict rules and procedures to manage their teams to achieve goals. So this might apply to, I suppose I was thinking about organisations like military organisations or perhaps prison service or something where, rules and procedures really have to apply. Perhaps, the police service might be this sort of leadership style. It's about providing clarity and consistency in decision making and ensuring adherence to standards and regulations. The cons of that, though, that could stifle creativity and flexibility. So if there's only one way of doing it and people are being measured against that one way, then, if you deviate from that, then it's not going to be good, but also it may not be good to for people who like to be creative and flexible, because there is only one way of doing it. And the other thing is it may lead to inefficiency and slow responses to change. So again, imagine there's a set of rules and you've got to follow those, but something in the environment changes. So something in the way that you work, or one of your customers or something else changes, then how do you deal with that? If it takes a long time to update the rules, and those rules have to be cascaded to everyone has to make sure they understand them, that could take some time. I mean, I have worked in command and control type organisations in the past, and for me, I'm quite a creative person. I like to innovate as well. It can feel quite stifling. Doesn't mean that there's, it doesn't have a time and a place, but for me, it wasn't the sort of leadership environment that I enjoyed. So there are 9 leadership styles there. Which of those is the absolute best? Let's have a look. I think you've probably guessed by now, given I've given pros and cons to a whole range of them. So the answer is absolutely none of them, but at the same time, all of them. There is no one style that is the absolute best, apart from the situational adaptive leadership style. So this is where leaders are flexible and able to adjust their approach on the needs of the situation and the team. So all of those leadership styles we've already seen, plus probably some others, it's about using all of those depending on the team you've got, the individuals you've got in your team, their experience, their knowledge, your own experience and your own knowledge, and the situation you happen to be dealing with at any given time. So the pros of that are that it's effective in navigating complex and rapidly changing environments. So, every single day as a leader, you come across things that you've never come across before. If you're stuck in a particular leadership style, and that's the only one that you can do, some of them will fit, some of them won't. If you don't adapt and you don't change and you don't use a different leadership style, you're just going to get stuck. You're not going to be able to get past it. Or you are going to get past it, but you might irritate your team, you might upset people, you might make people want to leave the organisation. Adapting and adjusting is exactly the right thing to do. And again, encourages problem solving and innovation. So, every single day I come across things that I've never come across before. I say if I'm stuck in a certain leadership style, I'm really going to struggle. However, I can think, well, what are the tools I've got? What are the leadership approaches I've got? How much time have I got? How much pressure am I under? How is the individual going to perceive what I'm saying? And all of the things we've talked about in all the other videos about understanding yourself and understanding your team become even more important, because it's about this connection again between you and the people, the person or the people that you're talking to. And you really need to know both sides. You need to know need to know what they're thinking and what they're capable of, to decide which of the leadership styles are the best to try and deliver whatever outcome you're looking for. There are cons though with this adaptive leadership style, as there have been with everything else, and as you can see there, this style requires a high level of emotional intelligence and adaptability. I mean, the adaptability speaks for itself, but really in my head it's a bit like having a toolbox full of tools. Well, which one's the right one for the job? It doesn't mean you have to go through every single tool. When you need a spanner, you need a spanner. When you need a chisel, you need a chisel. The emotional intelligence bit, though, is interesting. But for me, in order to be a leader and a great leader, you need a high level of emotional intelligence anyway. And again, we've talked about it in the previous videos. We've talked about the need to understand yourself and your people. That's emotional intelligence. And the other thing is it can be challenging to maintain consistency and stability. So, externally it may look like, it may look like you haven't got a particular leadership style. Well, you haven't, have you? You're not stuck in one particular grouping, one particular style, you're changing it and adapting it for whatever the situation is. I think consistency is really important as well from a follower perspective. So if you've got an inconsistent leader and you don't know what they're going to do, that can be really unsettling. And we'll cover that in another video. But for me, this isn't about that. I think for some people, they might not understand what you're going to do in a particular instance because they don't know which leadership style you're going to adopt. But as long as you adopt the same leadership style in that same situation each time, or similar situations each time, your team will know how you're going to react, and that consistency issue will disappear. So the absolute best leadership style is not any of these that you can see on the screen, not individually. It's all of them at the same time. It's you choosing the appropriate tool, the appropriate style for the situation, hence the name situational leadership. And just pick and choose, pick the best bits of each of those leadership styles and others that you come across. Talk to your team about it. You might have, as I said before, I think I've got more of a leaning towards a coaching style leadership approach. So, by default, I might lean towards something, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing I'm going to do. And when I'm talking to my team, mainly because, again, my default is a coaching leadership style, even if I'm under pressure and time pressure, I might go into the authoritative leadership style, make a decision, but when I've got a bit more time, go back and talk to the team about why I did that and what situation led me to make that decision. So again, you can still help your team understand why you did things, and then help them in their own leadership journey as well. So, just to summarise, situational leadership is the absolute best leadership style. I hope that was useful. I hope you're going to reflect on that. You're going to consider all of those leadership styles, consider how that compares to what you said at the start. And next time you're in an interview and somebody asks you a leadership question and says, well, what is your leadership style? My answer will be situational leadership, and I will explain why that's the case. I think anyone who tells you that it should be any one of those others and only one of those, that's they probably don't know what they're talking about. And the danger is they will end up having people in their organisation who does everything exactly the same way. Now, there might be some exceptions, of course. There, as I mentioned before, in certain environments, you might have to adopt a certain leadership style because it's absolutely necessary. You've got to fit with legislation, etc. But for the vast majority of us, situational leadership will be your most effective way of leading. I hope you enjoyed that. In the next video, I'm going to talk about, well, how do you determine which of those leadership styles to adopt at any given point? So I hope to see you in the next video. If you liked this one, obviously click the like button. Hopefully you've subscribed by now, and you've also signed up for future videos. So as they come out each Monday morning, you will get an alert to let you know that the new one exists. Please comment as well. I'm interested in feedback. I'm interested in any questions you may have. So please comment as well. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.